You had a news conference yesterday announcing the Operation Blue Night, getting guns and criminals off our streets. How long have y'all been working on this one?
We've been planning this specific operation for probably a month. This is part of our, continuing ongoing efforts for multi-agency approach to reduce violent crime. And then one of the best ways that law enforcement can reduce violent crime is taking guns away from people that should not possess them, from those that are illegally possessing them. So this wasn't, we don't typically run operations of this size, this number of people participating, but this is something we do generally on a weekly basis to target those people possessing weapons and wreaking havoc in our city.
Wreaking havoc is interesting to me. Describe some of the crimes some of these folks, and I know there's a bunch of them, there's dozens of folks, the range of crimes
Yeah.
that these folks have been involved in.
Yeah, so I'm looking through a list now. We made arrests for second-degree homicide, attempted homicide, first-degree rape, attempted second-degree homicide, possession of firearm by felons, possession of firearm with controlled dangerous substances, resisting arrest, first-degree rape, and then just again multiple possessions of firearms by convicted felons. So these are individuals who have been previously convicted of a felony offense, an enumerated offense, which could be a violent offense, and they're prohibited from possessing a firearm, but yet they're walking around our streets with guns in hand or in vehicle. And some of these individuals are the ones causing the problems in the neighborhood, with shootings and shots being fired, residences and houses, and vehicles being shot on a daily basis, just about.
Can many of these be moved to the federal court? Is that your hope?
Yeah, I don't know that many of them can. Certainly the U.S. Attorney's Office, through the federal task forces, primarily the ATF, will look at each of these arrests and determine whether the individual is a good fit for federal prosecution. And that depends on previous criminal history as well as, the current charges. They'll read the reports, they'll read the affidavits, and they'll make a decision what's the best avenue for that particular person. Is it through the federal court system, through the Project Safe Neighborhoods initiatives, or is it to go to Caddo District Attorney's Office?
Chief, how many are y'all getting a lead on where the guns are actually coming from? Like, once you're able to collect them, like, are you able to trace them back to where they might have come from before they ended up where you found them?
Yes, and that's a good question. We are able to trace where the guns come from. And I asked kind of the generic question a few days ago to our task force, our violent crimes abatement team. Have we identified where most of these guns are coming from? And the answer I received is twofold. One is they are being stolen from other people, whether that be from residences or vehicles. And number two is we have problems with straw purchasing, which is where an individual purchases a gun on behalf of another person. And generally the person I'm purchasing on behalf of is prohibited. So, for example, a girlfriend might buy for a boyfriend. A friend may buy for a friend who's a felon and cannot buy a weapon legally.
And sometimes it's just that a pawn shop got robbed, right?
Correct. Absolutely. Yeah. So there's a number of ways those guns can be taken. Yes.
But pawn shops aren't typically dealing in illegal guns, are they? We hope not.
Well, and there's that term when talk about an illegal gun. The gun in and of itself is rarely illegal. We talk about an illegal gun. Most people think about one that doesn't meet the federal guidelines. The barrel's too short. High capacity magazine, serial number has been removed. When I talk about an illegal gun, it generally refers to because of the person that possesses it. So I'm wearing a gun right now on my hip at work, but if a felon had this gun, it would be an illegal gun in their hands. And so a lot of these guns are purchased legally, quote unquote, by a person who is not prohibited from possessing that weapon at a pawn shop, a gun show, even in one of our dealerships, firearms dealers locally. But then that gun is then passed on to a person who is prohibited legally. And it's illegal. A straw purchase is illegal. It's a federal charge. And if we find out that someone's done that, we'll prosecute them. But it does occur.
Let me ask you something, Chief. I don't want to hit you too hard, but I want to hear in your voice today. You've been the scapegoat to many people. Our problem is policing, people will say. How frustrated are you with the rising crime in our city, the rising violent crime, I should say? How frustrated are you?
I'm frustrated, but, I'm a member of several national organizations, and I attend meetings with other chiefs around the nation, and we're all equally frustrated. If you look at crime as a whole, you'll notice that nationally, you generally see trends. So, for example, 2019, we had our lowest crime rate in 50 years. We had a drastic decrease in the number of homicides from 2018. But you look at it nationally, and a lot of agencies saw that same trend, right? So you can't say it was something that Ben Raymond and the Shreveport Police Department were solely responsible for, because we saw that nationally. And then in 2020, you saw nationally that violent crime skyrocketed, in many cities saw the highest violent crime rates they've ever seen. Ours weren't the highest they've ever been, but they were very high. And so you realize that a lot of this is based on national trends, and so it's going to be connected to a lot of things that apparently law enforcement doesn't have complete control over. And I've mentioned those things before, and it's a long laundry list of concerns. But we're all equally frustrated.
Go ahead. Okay.
No.
I wanted to ask you another question about will you be able to show data that this weekend gun roundup has impacted our crime rate? Are you hopeful, and how do you measure that?
See, and that's the problem. And I want to use an example. So I worked in the street level interdiction unit for a number of years, which is a proactive enforcement unit, and we made numerous arrests on a nightly basis. I can't tell you how much violent crime that may have prevented, because the crimes didn't occur. I can just tell you that logically, if I get a person off the street who has a violent criminal history and is in possession of a firearm, and they spend some time in jail, and we seize that firearm and destroy it, that I probably, or I may have, committed or prevented a violent crime from being committed. That's exactly like this weekend's operation. I can't tell you if any of these 47 firearms would be involved in a violent offense, but I can tell you that logically, some of those 47 firearms and some of those 58 people we put in jail probably would have been involved in some violent offense had we not taken them off the street. But there's not going to be a way for us to ever tell you we prevented X number of shootings, X number of homicides, X number of robberies.
But you can see when the stats are showing lower numbers.
Yes, ma'am, certainly. You can see if we have a quieter 2 or 3 week period, especially right here in the heat of the summer, that most likely you can contribute some of that to this initiative.
How much of this is related to gangs?
I think a fair amount of it is. And again, I use the gang term a little bit more loosely than with the federal guidelines. Federal guidelines are very specific to what has to be included for it to be considered a gang. When I use the word gang, I'm talking about a group of people who are united in some way. Maybe because they live in the same neighborhood, maybe they went to school together, and they have they're protecting some territory, some turf, some business enterprise, and generally have problems with an opposing group of people. A decent amount of our violent crime is gang related, and I'd say a decent amount, maybe half. You're always going to have domestic incidents. You're always going to have quote unquote random acts of violence that where two individuals are involved in a fight, or maybe a robbery gone bad or something like that. But a decent amount of our violent crime we can connect to groups of individuals feuding with one another and retaliatory shootings. And sometimes these retaliatory shootings are from a shooting that occurred 1 to 2 years ago. So it doesn't necessarily mean that there's shooting after shooting after shooting.
But
sometimes, like Hatfield, McCoy, these things just last and last. So
is the general order that defines gang violence for SPD different than the federal definition?
Well, and I'm not defining gang from an SPD standpoint. I'm defining gang from more of a Ben Raymond opinion. But yeah, the federal definition, the federal government has guidelines of specifically what has to be included as a gang, the number of people that are closely associated, and in fact, I'd have to pull it up just to be accurate with it. But I'm a little more loose in my definition, because sometimes by a federal guideline, I have to be able to prove you're a gang, right? I have to be able to show several things so they will identify you and classify a group of people as a gang. I don't know that we can classify all these individuals that are feuding as gang members. But again, if me and my 5 buddies are hanging out at my house and we went to, I went to Northwood High School, and we don't like Southwood High School just because we're not supposed to, because my dad told me he didn't like Southwood High School, and we decided to go over there and get in a fight with Southwood High School, I'm going to consider that a gang. but it might not meet the definition that the federal government has set forth.
Your plans for this hot summer? More people are going to be out on the streets. More people are getting outside doing things. We could have more heated things happening. What is Chief Ben Raymond's plan and his message to his officers for this summer?
Well, let me start off with a message to the officers, is that I appreciate your hard work. Officers have been working very hard, short-staffed, working double shifts in many instances. I personally appreciate what you do. I thank you for everything you do, and I'll ask you to, just stay the fight and keep with it. From the plan for the summer, and it's multi-tiered, but we're very excited about the violent crime abatement team that we've formed. And again, this weekend was kind of a kickoff for the violent crime abatement team work to take advantage of some technology and to really help us in our investigations of identifying specifically who is really causing the problems. Right? Who not just is carrying a gun illegally, but who's involved in all these shootings, shooting up houses and cars and vehicles and things like that. And we think we'll be able to identify those individuals and put them in jail. Secondly, we're going to continue to run our special operations based on some of the events that occur in the summer. The cruising operations on Sunday night, the drag racing, street racing that occurs on weekends and in specific areas of town. We're going to continue the emergency supplemental patrol so that we have a sufficient number of officers on the street on a daily basis to respond to calls for service and for the safety of other officers. We can continue to work with the community. We're working on some initiatives now based on that listening session we had on, I believe, May 18th, is ways that the community can contribute to reducing crime with the assistance of the police department. And so there's just a number of things that we're doing right now, because this is the heat of the summer, and this is the time of year we can have the most effect on violent crime. June, July, and August is typically where we have those high months. Mm-hmm. And so we need to just be consistent with these special operations and again, just stay in the fight.